Thank you so much for joining me, Mira, and welcome to the Flutarians who are joining me in the live stream now or in the replay in the future. I'm so grateful that you came to share a little bit of your story with us. I'll let you take it away in just a second, but I wanted to thank you for providing some feedback as another flute teacher in the past year. I think we connected probably about a year ago through the Flute Teachers Network, and um, I have an interest in this subject of healing and learning new things because the Johnny Wills, the guy who helped me crack the code on improvisation, he had a stroke after we were playing music together, and he talked to me some about the experience of relearning to play guitar, and I just thought, wow, the brain is so crazy and amazing. And I've heard a few people say something like improvising has helped them reignite their passion for flute or even overcome focal dystonia. So, thanks for joining me. Would you tell us a little bit about how your day is going and where are you at in your flute story now today?
Sure, and hi everyone. Thanks for letting me come hang out. I appreciate it. I'm currently in my beautiful, stunning office at home. So, welcome to Connecticut, everyone. Um, uh, Things actually got a little halted from what I've been wanting to do, which I will kind of go into, but I had to, I'm gonna wait one more year to apply for my doctorate. I wanted to start right now, but I'm gonna wait another year because sometimes things happen. I've always been the optimist. I think it's helped me throughout my entire life. So that's how I'm thinking about this whole thing. Um, but yeah, so Flute Land. Um, well, going back slightly, I started music when I was 4.5. I started on violin. I was terrible. I openly admitted that I was awful. Um, I did my time. I had a very, very patient teacher who put up with me. Um, I played until fourth grade, and then I was like, okay, I'm done, whatever. And then everyone in my school district in fifth grade has to learn an instrument.
Mm.
So I tried a bunch of things, and I want to learn flute. I like this a lot more. And I was like the only one, or maybe there was another person who could actually make a sound at first. So they were like, sure, why not? So I'm a little biased. My dad plays flute, so he was my first flute teacher.
Aw.
Yay. It's very cute. Um, and he also had a piccolo. So I was like, all right, I've been playing for a few years. Why don't I start piccolo? So in seventh grade, I started piccolo. And by the time I got to high school, that's what I was known for. I think it's severely misunderstood. I think it's very beautiful. It's just very hard to make it beautiful, but it's very beautiful.
If you play piccolo, are you a piccoloist or a piccolist?
I feel like piccoloist is very uncomfortable to say because it's just like it keeps going.
Piccolist sounds like pickles. I'm okay
Yeah,
with
and
that.
so I'm like, I don't know if there's like a good way of saying it. But I think I'd rather go with piccolist. But I still feel like it just seems wrong. But whatever.
So do you agree that a piccolo is not a beginner instrument?
Piccolo should never be done by a beginner ever. I think that there has to be a very, very much an understanding as to what the mouth has to do on flute before you go, hey, let's give you something smaller. Because the initial instinct, which was mine, openly admit it, is to go, okay, let's see how small I can make my mouth right now. And it's just, no, you're hurting yourself. You're making this so much harder. And chances are you're going to make a sound that people aren't going to enjoy.
So you became known as the piccolo player in your region. What next? What happened?
So then I was like, all right, I don't want to stop doing this. I really like this. This is fun. And my dad was like, I don't know if I can teach you anymore. So I started asking around the other flute teachers, the other flute students in the band in high school, and was like, okay, who do you take from? And so I got to work. I switched to another teacher, and I loved working with her. She was perfect for me. And she helped prep me for undergrad. Because I was like, yep, I'm not letting this go. So I went to Western Michigan University. Go Broncos. And I was a flute performance major and a history minor because I'm a nerd and I like history. And it took about 2 years to fix my embouchure, to hold the flute properly, because I made a good enough sound and my fingers went well enough, and so everyone was like, whatever. But, I should take these off to make this better. I used to play like this. Because no one corrected it.
Looks like a recipe for carpal tunnel, right?
And I had, like, my tendons were so inflamed all the time. And you can't move your fingers quickly when you're like this. Like, there's just... It's really... So there was so much that wasn't right. And this was my embouchure. So I was such a smiley girl. What can I say? And so it took about 2 years to get that to relax. And the sound difference was just mind-blowing. Because when I started to let go here, it was like, oh, I can actually do things with sound. Oh, I can fix pitch better. Oh, look at all these things I was trying to do. So most people looked at me when I graduated high school and went, Western Michigan, that's not a real school. You're not going to do anything with your life. And it was just whatever. And it was the absolute place I needed to be. And I studied with the perfect woman. She retired my senior year. So she's not there anymore. But she was like, hey, you should go study with my friend out at Ithaca College. And I was like, all right. So I took a lesson. And I was like, oh, I really like her. Yes, please, and thank you. And so I auditioned and I got in.
Hooray.
So I went from a school that no one thought would do anything to, oh, that's right, Ithaca's a conservatory. And there were actually 2 of us that came in that year. And the other person who came in my year, she did her undergrad at Eastman. And I was like, okay, I feel a little bit better about my life. And she's still someone I will like randomly contact. Like she's a total sweetie.
Flute friends.
So you're just like, oh, we should all work together. We should all be friends. That's how it is. But things ended not in the best way.
Mm.
And I'm going to say what I can say. Go a little bit more into my history, and then it'll all make sense. So I studied with one woman for 3 semesters, and then she went on sabbatical. And I worked with the assistant flute professor. And we were not the best of friends. It didn't end happy. We just didn't work well. We just kind of butted up against each other a bit. And she failed me in lessons. I reported everything to the administration, and they fired her. My professor came back from sabbatical. She found out about everything and said, no, I'm teaching you lessons this summer. This is ridiculous. And so I graduated late. I needed a break from school badly. So I moved back to Michigan. I moved back to Kalamazoo, where Western is. And that's when my wonderful husband started his master's at Western. He was doing orchestral conducting. It's a really cute story. It's all because of Beethoven's how we met. Aw, cute. He was doing a reading session of Beethoven 7, and I played in a community orchestra in undergrad, and I decided to come back, and my husband contacted that director as well and was like, hey, do you have any players that might be willing to come in and help fill out the group? And so I saw the invitation because it was sent out to all the members, and I went, it's Beethoven. Of course I want to do it. So I contacted him and was like, well, I'm sure you have enough flute players, but if for some reason you need someone, I would love to come play Beethoven. So he did have enough flute players, but he didn't have anyone to play second oboe. So I played second oboe on flute.
I was going to say that would be quite an accomplishment to be able to play that on oboe as well.
No, reeds are weird. No. To each their own. Hey, for all those doublers out there that can do that, awesome. I'll just double from flute to piccolo. So the first time I saw him conduct, when he started this, that was it for me.
It was over.
Because I realized he was conducting the way I thought about music, down to the tiniest detail. So it's Beethoven's fault. How terrible. So we started hanging out together. He got his degree. And he got a job with the Army bands, to be a conductor. And in order to be a conductor, they don't care who you're living with because you're an officer. So he got through basic training, fine. Then he got to officer candidate school, and he didn't sit up enough times. So it's a very long story. I'm not going to go into it. But he had to get special permission to become a trumpet player with the Army bands. His undergrad is in trumpet. So fine. So, in order for us to live together, we had to get married very quickly. Because he was no longer going to be an officer. We were planning on getting married. So it wasn't like it was a surprise.
It is a bit of a plot twist, though.
A little bit. So we did a very quick wedding with our parents, and there were a couple of friends, because my husband was a choir director at a church. And so they were the friends a few friends that were in the church, the choir, they came as well. So we got married very quickly, whatever. Then we moved down to Missouri, where he was stationed. And that's where things get really complicated. The closest place that I could find work was about 45 minutes away. So I was driving one way to one part of the state, and then I was playing in an orchestra in Springfield, which we're in this part of the state. Well, let me make this a little more visible. There we go. This part of the state. And that was there. So I was driving all over the state.
It's a little bit of a different story, and, well, I was going to say Connecticut, but what I was thinking is Texas. I mean, Texas is... You don't want to drive across Texas. That'll take all day.
That'll take forever and a day.
Anyway, do continue.
One day I was driving, and I turned a corner too quickly. I always get the story wrong, which I'll explain in a little bit why. So, assuming I'm doing this properly, I ran into a tree, but it was the passenger side door that ran into a tree. That unhinged, smacked me. I fell forward, and I smacked here and here.
Already.
On the steering wheel and passed out. I have no idea who was behind me, but there was someone behind me. They immediately pulled over. They called. They literally, because of how quick that was, they saved my life. I want to give them a giant hug. I don't know who it is, as I said, but thank you. I was in a helicopter. That's cool. I have no memory of it, but that's cool. I was airlifted to the University of Missouri, or as they would say, Mizzou. They have the best emergency hospital in the area, in the state. The next closest, I think, was in Kansas City, Kansas. But that was the best. When I arrived, I was a borderline coma patient. I broke my first bone.
I was just wondering if you broke any other bones. I guess so. So tell us about it.
I broke several other bones. But to give you an idea of how much fun this was, my bottom jaw was in 3 pieces.
So I guess it was wired shut for at least 6 weeks or something like that, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
But the scariest thing, and I go back, so like I had a bunch of nerve damage in this arm and whatnot. But the scariest thing, oh, my right lung collapsed. That's important. Um, but when I hit the steering wheel, my brain went like this inside, went like this, and then went back. So what happened was I had a severe traumatic brain injury. Um, so there's parts of the story that I just mentioned,
You have no
they have been told to
recollection.
me. There is like a certain part of time that's totally gone. People will mention stories from childhood that I'm like, what are you talking about? So there's like weird pockets that's totally, it's a very odd thing.
So would you call it amnesia?
I've never really gotten it back though. So it's just it the best way to describe it is it's like looking at like just like a black screen from a movie and just going, okay, I guess there's no film there. Cool.
Like looking at your memory through Swiss cheese or something.
Yes, that's a very good way of saying it.
So if I'm remembering correctly from I saw your talk before or a presentation, didn't you lose memory up back to something like almost like a specific date or like right before the accident?
It's because it's Swiss cheesy. It's a little hard to do, but it's like a couple of months before I know are completely gone, but even like a year or so before is very odd because it's very Swiss cheesy. Like I feel like there's more holes than there are cheese.
Hmm.
So yes, if that helps.
So so you were telling us about your quick private wedding, and then you had this accident. So what was it? How long was it until you woke up, and what was it like?
Um, well, that was in June 2016, I think. And I things start to make more sense and like start to piece together a little bit more. It's either the very, very, very end of August of that year or sometime in September. I'm just not quite sure where, but it's so weird. And I mean when I got I mean when I was in the hospital and they pieced me all back together and then um, I got discharged to basically a I don't want to say step down hospital, but it wasn't like an emergency area anymore. It was like the rehab, but we still want to make sure that just in case something happened, we can immediately bring her back in. Like it was a very we want to keep a very close eye on her. But and then so then I got out of there, woohoo, and then I went to a rehab hospital. And that's when I started the beginning of physical therapy and all that fun stuff. I was in a wheelchair for a bit. Um, that's cool. I don't remember that, but that's cool. Um, Yeah, it it's a very odd world to kind of look into going, wait, that happened?
I'm remembering a video I've seen of an old woman with dementia who used to be a ballerina, and you can see in the first part of the video she's pretty far gone, so to speak. Then they put on a piece of music that she used to dance to, and she starts dancing, and it's like it
Mm-hmm.
overcomes her whole um, countenance. And I'm wondering if music was like that for you.
Very much so. Um, I have no memory of this story. My husband told me this. Um, but apparently, my jaw was wired shut still, and he put on a recording of Mozart in G, which there are many things I find hilarious about that, but that's neither here nor there. Um, and apparently, I started moving my fingers underneath the sheets. And he goes, "Are you fingering along?" And apparently, I went from underneath the sheets to, and I started fingering along to Mozart. And that was she's still in there. Okay. Because they had no idea how much damage had happened. Um, and the reason why I find it funny is because if Mozart was alive, he would have gone, why is a woman playing flute? That's wrong. Because, as, when he was living, women wouldn't have done that. So it's just like, oh, this would have bothered him. Okay, that's funny. Whatever.
Gosh, that was a long old time ago. I'm just real curious at this moment about, like, well, where are you now, and what was it like in the interim? I'm just imagining. I know, as a community of flute players, the idea of being in an accident that either crushes your hand or crushes your jaw is a shared nightmare. So, was there a moment at which you remembered, oh, right, I was practically a professional flutist. What the heck now? What happens now?
Well, what's weird is I have no memory of where I was.
Where you
Like
were.
like before the accident. I don't know. Um, I finally got a new flute. Finally. I needed it in undergrad, I needed it in grad school. Finally got it. Don't remember getting it.
So you go home to a brand new flute, but basically.
Yeah, and I was like, what's this gold thing? Like the first time I pulled out a flute, I pulled out my altus because that's the flute I remembered. I was like, I have a Haynes? What? What are you talking about? That's crazy. Um, but I mean, the thing that's weird and is still bothering me. It's not as bad as it used to be, but I still can't expand my right lung the same way. It has never expanded the way it used to before the accident, because that was the side that collapsed. Um,
Mm.
so I still have to breathe more, and that bothered. I mean, that's an issue. Like, I probably can never be an orchestral player because I have to breathe more, and that's a problem. Um, do I basically dream in Beethoven's music all the time? Yes. So it's
I
a
was
little
gonna
weird.
say probably depends on which orchestra. I mean, maybe not the New York Philharmonic, but
I mean, yes, but
did
it's a very odd feeling.
didn't you say you had recently moved and recently gotten married right before all this happened?
Yes.
So, do you remember the move and the marriage?
I remember living in Kalamazoo, and then I woke up in Missouri.
Wow.
That's weird. Apparently, I also don't remember this. Apparently, I thought my husband was my brother.
Ooh,
And so he,
that's weird.
yeah, totally weird. So, like, think because, you know, things were trying to connect in the brain, but with the way the brain shifted in the accident, things were not talking to each other. So it was like the images that I was seeing weren't necessarily what I was actually, what were actually there. So that was very odd.
I just thought of this phrase: "Lost, you lost your marbles," so to speak.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I did.
They got shaken up, is what happened. Yeah.
But fortunately, I have not made that mistake in a very long time. So that's good.
Well, that just what a weird experience overall. Yeah, I've seen some videos of people waking up from like surgeries or whatever, where they mistake who they're with, or they forget that they were married, or it's sometimes sweet, sometimes just weird.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, so tell us about your first experiences trying to play the flute after this accident.
So I waited a little bit,
Like
couple
a
of months.
day, a month, a year.
Um, or maybe it was about a month. In other words, I didn't do it like the next day. Um, but with all the nerve damage I had in my hand, in my, what is this? My right hand. There we go. I'm a lefty, so I've never been so happy in my life to be a lefty. But I remember when I had no feeling in these three fingers.
I bet
So
that
that
made
was very,
playing low B a hell of a problem.
it, it was, it was so weird. Um, I still have plugs in my first and third fingers because I still don't have all the feeling in these three. It's really close, but I still, like, if I take it out, I sometimes miss the key because I don't quite feel it, but I think I'm covering the whole.
Do I
It's a
remember
very
you
odd
saying
feeling.
something about putting basically grip tape on your
Mm-hmm.
flute? What kind of tape did you use?
Um, so it's basically like surgeon's tape, basically. Um, I wanted to make sure it'd be okay to put on the instrument first, of course, which it was, so
Naturally.
that's why I did it. Um, but I put it around like little patches, like a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, and a little bit here, so that every part of the finger could feel everything. Um, but I also didn't want to put it all the way around because I didn't want to feel like I was stuck to it. Like I had to have it there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and what that did is it helped me go, okay, this is where it is. Feel comfortable with it. Feel better with it. And I I kept going back and forth between taking the plugs out and putting, because I was like, I've been playing for years without plugs. Like, this just feels wrong to me. Like, what am I doing? But every time I took them out, I had to put them back in because I just kept missing too much. And I was
Well, you
like,
said
I
you
don't
had
want
nerve
to be
damage in your hand, right? So I
Yeah.
guess it just gave you a little bit more sensory information to probably literally reform those pathways. How's your feeling now?
Um, it's just the third and the pinky that I don't have all the feeling. Um, but I think the third finger is like 95% there, and the pinky is about, let's say 90.
It's pretty good.
So yeah, I'll
Yeah.
take it.
How about your embouchure?
So that's a funny story.
That's the whole story. I want to hear this story.
Um, so Well, going back slightly. Okay. Um, I used to only play straight up and down. Like my opening, I thought was right in the middle.
Mm.
And then in undergrad, when I started adjusting and relaxing here, it actually, that was the very, very edge. And it actually was slightly off center. So then I had to figure out, okay, I've got to move it here, whatever. Well, when I started playing again, because of them having to push, kind of reconstruct it again, my embouchure moved.
It's got to be a trippy experience. I'm just
So it was
imagining you in front of the mirror and being like, is this real? Is this really happening?
and like, this isn't what I remember. What's going on? This is weird. I'm going based on muscle memory. Um, and what was really weird about it is one of the metal plates at one point got infected. And so my bottom lip started swelling.
Oh no.
And turns out everything, they did an x-ray, everything had healed, and they could just take it out. So I was like, fine, awesome. So then my embouchure moved slightly off center to a little bit more off center. And then I couldn't play for a little bit because I had to make sure everything healed based upon that surgery. And then it went back to where it used to be and it went great, awesome. And then things started to get a little bit easier because I went, okay, it's going to stay in the same place every day. Cool. Awesome. But it was very odd because I didn't, it was basically like I had to for everything, I had to reteach myself every basic thing.
That's what I was just thinking. I was remembering, I chatted with Stephanie Barrett the week before last, and she had an experience where a complication from her pregnancy caused lots of swelling in her lips and her embouchure, and it just totally wrecked her embouchure for what it was. And I'm thinking that you must have felt almost like some Frankenstein of like a beginner and a pro, right? What was it? What was that mindset like? Did you feel like a beginner all over again?
Yes, very much so. And when I first, even when I first started playing again, I started playing and, I'd play for like 10 minutes and go, I have to put this away. I can't mentally do this right now. Because like with the right lung collapsing and I started playing again, it was like, let me play a note for about 2 seconds and then I had to breathe again. And so it was like,
felt, huh?
and so I had to, it was like, okay, I can't do this. And I just had to keep putting things away. And what my mind started to do was, okay, how would I teach a student? And that was the only way I could mentally do it because it was traumatizing to me. It was like, I've come so far in my life. Why can't I do this? And that's where my mind kept going. And I was like, no, I'm not going to let this win.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, okay, how can I change my mindset to do this better? And I went, what do I love doing? Private teaching. So I became my teacher.
How was that?
And I mean, there were days where it was hard, where it was like, okay. But there were days where it was like, you know what, this is better. What did I do to make sure that this was better this time? and what can I do to continue this growth to make it better? And I, being the optimist that I've always been, I let that take over completely. And then I became able to go, okay, I'm a student. And I went, okay, that's the mindset I got to do. And that's how it became easier.
Were you teaching flute students at the time too?
No. We moved out here and then COVID hit.
So you had kind of
So-
some time for incubating, so to speak.
Yeah. Um, so it's been a little it's a little tough, but I have students now, so that's cool. I like them. They're fun.
One of the things I've been reflecting on a little bit this week as I work with a couple of my adult students is this idea of how do you become your own best teacher? And I started going off on a soapbox and I kind of reined it in, but the soapbox is mostly why do all these classical music teachers just tell people what to think instead of teaching them how to think? Because you can spend your whole life going to an expert musician and saying, what do I do next? But if you never start asking yourself, how well did I do that? What do I want to do next? Then you'll never develop your own unique voice. And as an improviser, you've got to have your own unique voice or else you'll just sound like somebody else. It's okay to sound like somebody else if that's your intention. But I think most of us who are improvising are trying to let something on the inside out. So.
Well, that's something that when I'm teaching, I look at my students and I go, okay, what did you think of that? And they're like, I don't know. Or they'll be like, okay, it was better. Or, nah, it wasn't as good. I'll be like, why do you think that?
Mm-hmm.
And I constantly am going, you're going to think for yourself. Which is really funny because at the end of the day, if I'm asked to solo, sure, fine, but no, please, I don't want to be a soloist. That's not my profession. I like working with people.
Well, one of the things I noticed about you and that I think kind of connects us is that you were talking about being on the edge of a DMA program and DMA. I always mix up master. I always hear the M and DMA and think of masters and forget about the D as the doctorate. But you're on the edge of that. But
I haven't started yet.
You said you started the music and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, for the application.
Well, where I was going with that is that it's not so much just to get the education, but to be in a position to teach at a college level or postgraduate sort of level, and that. Well, I have certainly come to a place in my life where it's sure I can solo, sure I can step into the limelight when the time is right, but I realize that I'm here now at this time in my life anyway to teach. So I'm also remembering that you were saying you had a extreme change in your embouchure during undergrad. For me, in order to change my firm, smiley embouchure here, I had to take some time off. And it was after coming back after about 6 months and also during that time playing some other instruments. I played cello a little bit. I played guitar a little bit. I realized how much of a beginner I was with those instruments, and it kind of helped me remember the beginner mindset. Because if you're trying to change a habit that you've had for 4 or 10 or 20 years, like, you gotta approach it from a totally different angle, or else you're just gonna fall back into that old habit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes.
So how did you change your embouchure without taking a break, And now that you're coming back, is there anything that's changed, like for the better or for the worse, I guess?
Well, I worked with the most perfect woman for me in undergrad. I am so grateful. I I love this woman dearly. Um, and she looked at me and went, "There's something in you. You're special." And she went, "I'm going to make sure you see it." Because I was horrible to myself.
Mm.
If I played a wrong note or did a wrong articulation, my immediate mindset was, I'm terrible, I'm a failure, I don't know anything. Um, and which is another story I could go into. Um, but, she looked at me and went, "You're not horrible. You're a lot better than you think you are. We're just going to chip away at this. And I'm going to have you understand that you actually do have something in you." And she was so patient with me. And
She
that's
chipped you away
exactly
like a
what I
slab
needed.
of marble. Like I was just thinking, they say that the Greek sculptures were sculpted out of a single piece of rock, and you said chipped away, and yeah, I can identify with that experience of looking at someone, and it's like you already see the masterpiece, but they can't see it yet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And and she was so patient with me, and she would just give me these teeny tiny little changes that just inched me a little bit there and a little bit there, and that's how I did it. Um, and then in grad school, that's when I started Alexander technique.
Mm. It can change
Um,
the world, can't it?
it was amazing. I recommend it all the time to people because that was when I stopped going, "I'm a failure because I made a mistake," to, "It's okay. This, I'm still learning. It's okay. You can make mistakes."
It's the only way to
In
learn.
fact, and that's what I tell people. I'm like, how do you learn? You have to make the mistake. We don't like making mistakes, but then you go, "Okay, that's not quite right. Now let me tweak this thing." "Okay, cool, great, awesome." And that's what I've been doing since the accident is, okay, I gotta tweak this. Okay, I gotta work on this. And oh boy, my brain now, since it's healed more, understands more things. Yay. So now I need to figure out a way to, I'm from here to here. How do I get from here to here now?
Sure.
And it helped me kind of get into that mindset of, yes, I want to go from 0 to 100 immediately, of course,
Naturally.
but that's not going to happen. So how do I get there slowly so that it's possible? And I still am finding those things in my playing, and I go, okay, it's okay, I'll get there.
Mm. I'm curious, did you remember your scales, or one scale but not another scale?
No, everything was there. It's like those neuro pathways, like, were still there, totally fine.
So you've been practicing them since you were, well, maybe not 4, but 11, maybe.
I mean, I probably should have played them sooner than that. But I mean, yeah. I mean, I had drilled those for years, and it's like, okay, this is helping. Um,
It's like riding a bicycle.
I mean, there's a reason why music therapy works, which I also did music therapy. That's another long, crazy story, but neither here nor there. But
One of the most.
what,
Sorry, go ahead.
oh, what they discovered is, and like my husband would tell me afterwards because he'd be in the sessions, and he'd be like, you realize that with like what you were doing with your fingers as they were trying to get more feeling in those fingers, as well as having you think about, because at one point they were like, hey, can you play these chords on a keyboard, which I hadn't done in, I don't know, I think I was a sophomore in college. But yeah, C major chord. I know it's C, E, G, done. Um, but what it was doing was it was taking those pathways and helping to find new ways to go from point A to point B. Were some of them point 1A, 1B, 1C to get to point, to 2? Yes. But that's what it was doing, was it was connecting things because music was just so ingrained in me.
Yeah. What I was just starting to say a few seconds ago about in response to that is that one of the most fascinating things I heard at the focal dystonia panel at the last NFA convention was someone said that playing a different genre of music, jazz for example, compared to classical, allowed them to go around the neural pathway that was initiating the stress that caused the nerve disorder that made them not able to, for their muscles to do what their brain was trying to tell them. And I always think about this, that sort of like game we played as kids of, we're going on a bear hunt, going to wherever you're going, and they say, can't go over it, can't go around it, gotta go through it. And it's like going through a river or whatever. But when I think that, I think of the opposite of like, well, you can't go through, now you can't go through it anymore. That pathway is blocked or messed up or whatever, so you got to go around it, or you got to go over it, or you got to go under it. And when I say that, I think of like the neural pathways in the brain, that image where it looks like a galaxy, right? And you see the pathways forming. Yeah, so what advice might you give to someone who's been through a similar experience and is relearning now?
Be patient. Be very patient. Some of this that was in my favor was I was educated. I was young. And for once in my life, my stubbornness worked for me.
I was gonna say, and you were determined, which if you don't have a specific goal in mind that you're determined to reach, you're probably never gonna get there. Did you have a specific goal, that like a milestone?
I mean, I think getting to the doctorate is still the milestone. Um, it's gonna be complicated because I've talked to my doctors about it because I have several, and all of them say you can do it. but you have to be part-time. Your brain cannot handle a full class load. So it's going to take you longer. And that's a little frustrating. As much as I want it to be 3 years, it's not going to be 3 years.
Mm.
But, I mean, I have the best dissertation topic ever now.
So, well, okay. What are you going to call it?
It's the accident and recovering.
Heck, let's make a musical out of it. Why not?
Yes.
I mean, you've basically already written the script. Yeah.
And, every time I've talked to this about people, it's really inspired them. Which I think is really important because the music world isn't always nice.
No, it's not. And I'm wondering who are all these mean teachers. Please don't tell me. But
I won't.
but I do have something kind of rattling around in my brain at this moment, which is like, oh, well, you didn't ask for my advice, but I just asked you to give people advice. So if I had advice, what advice would I give people? And I think about this phrase of playing within your limits. Because now, as someone who is an awakener of improvisation, inner improvisation, sometimes I'm talking to people who they're getting arthritis, or they haven't played in 20 years, or whatever the reason is, but they feel that performance anxiety of the inner critic of, oh, I've got to be good for this audition, or I've got to be good for this lesson or for this teacher. But the critical mind is not where music enjoyment is, or music appreciation. And so I've seen countless times children who know next to nothing about music improvise joyfully. So, I mean, on a xylophone or a piano or a drum, all you got to do is hit the instrument and you're playing music. Add a little bit of intention and you can be collaborating with other people. So I've noticed in my own journey as an improviser that how and what I play on any given day can be different than the next day. If I'm tired, if I was sick, if I'm sad or something is going on, my range is not going to be this, big range. I'm going to play it safe. And someone who's listening will probably never know. But my advice would be to remember that zone of your abilities now, and be generous with playing within that, because it's called playing for a reason. It's supposed to be fun. Yeah.
And it's definitely something when I'm teaching, although my lessons are half an hour, which I feel like I blink and they're done, because half an hour lessons are very short. But, I try to get my students to go, I don't care that you made a mistake. I don't care. Did you have fun? Did you learn something? Then that's the important thing. And when you walk in this room for a lesson, this is a safe place. You make as many mistakes as you need to. Because, let's face it, the flute world can be very catty. And we need to be nicer to each other.
Yeah. I see music as an inherently collaborative thing, but there's a lot of competitiveness out there.
And competition is important because I think it helps propel you to keep improving. But sometimes I feel like the competition takes over and makes you go, I'm better than you, or I need to be better than you. It's like, no. We need to make sure that we work with people. We need to be nice to people, because it's word of mouth sometimes. And if you want a job, you want to work, you need to make sure that, people actually want to work with you. Otherwise, you're not going to get a job.
So, if you had to boil it down into one overall lesson, what would it be?
Oh,
I know, tough, big questions.
dun dun dun. Sometimes life gives you not the easiest set of paints to use. You just don't think those colors are going to work together.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that you're stuck with those paints. Maybe you have to blend the colors together. Maybe you've got to figure out your own pathways to make the painting beautiful and make it how you want to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And for the record, I should never be a painter ever. I'm terrible, but oh, do I admire it so much.
I make this metaphor sometimes when I'm talking about which notes to choose when we're improvising, the warm notes or the cool notes, the blue notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that, well, life in music or even a painting wouldn't be very fun if it were all the same warm, fuzzy colors all the time. We got to have some of those contrasting moments to generate a good story or a painting that's like really pops. So I appreciate that metaphor you were just making about the paints. Yeah, and I do enjoy painting some and drawing and visual art, and I see when I'm doing that sort of art, it's the same as improvising in music, where it's not as much about not making mistakes as about making the mistakes beautiful, because mistakes are going to happen. Yeah, that part's unavoidable.
It's unfortunately it is a part of human nature, but how we respond to it doesn't, that's not set in stone. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. Because and I used to get stuck there too, so I get it, but it's not just the mistake happened. Mistakes happen, but what are you going to do about it? How are you going to get better? How are you going to improve? I mean, that's kind of how I kept fighting along, and I'm still fighting along.
That makes me think of a question that feels almost too technical, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I'm so curious.
Go for it.
If it were hypothetically possible to get back to 100% playing ability, what you were before, what percentage do you feel like you're at compared to where you remember being before the accident? Like 95%, 90%?
I think I'm about 80% now.
That's certainly enough to teach an amazing perspective to some flutists who are struggling with just the fundamentals. Sorry to kind of interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's totally fine. I mean, I look at them and I go, I used to do that. It's okay. I know why you're doing that. I want to make sure you don't do what I did for as long as I did. And they're like, oh, you understand. Yeah, I really do.
Reducing global carpal tunnel. Thanks, Mira. Or specific carpal tunnel and a few specific flute players.
I do what I can.
Well, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time tonight to just share a little bit of your story, a little bit of your perspective. I look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing how things continue to develop and maybe making some musical collaboration in the not too distant future.
Ooh, fun. I mean, I haven't done jazz since 8th grade, but Why not?
Well, my main intention in the group improv game sessions that I've been hosting is not only to have some fun playing music with other people, but also to create a safe space for taking some of those baby steps for improving improvising by demonstrating through games some of the ideas that have made it possible for me to have confidence. So we keep it pretty basic, like building blocks, but it's pretty incredible to see the music that can result from such simple um, guidelines sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we? Well, I guess if there's anybody watching in the live stream, now would be a good time to drop comments. I don't see any questions at the moment. Anything you'd like to add, Mira?
Um, I mean, it's oddly therapeutic to talk about all of this. I don't know why it is. I feel like it shouldn't be. Like, this is what almost dying is like. Yay! But it's oddly therapeutic to be like, no, it's okay. And I think being the positive person that I've always been really has helped throughout my entire life. And I mean, I wouldn't be here if I wasn't that tough, strong woman to say, no, I need to be the person I am.
Mm.
So just
And
things
an
happen for a
optimist to boot.
reason.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's been really inspiring to hear your story of passion and persistence. I mean, persistence, I think, is a key word when it comes to studying flute, especially. And
mhm.
I think so. I listened to a live stream of yours from, gosh, a year or so ago, and it was a little bit choppy. So I hope you do something like that again, either at a flute conference, or you can do it here on the Flutarians group if you want to just push go on the live stream. And I think you'll find that speaking publicly about it every once in a while will kind of punctuate your recovery experience. Like if you went back and looked at that video from a year ago, you'd probably be like, "Gosh, I've come so far since then." So I'll be curious to see where you're at in a year when you watch this video again.
Yay. And I mean, if you have any other thoughts, I kind of was like, what things do you people want to hear? And so, yeah, I'm
Yes.
always game.
So, is there a special way that maybe viewers could reach you if they'd like to ask you more questions?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a good way to do it is via email. It's my first name dot my last name at Gmail. I know, it's very complicated.
Is it
Um,
Spinner or Shifrin?
it's Spenner.
Okay.
Um, that was fun. So my maiden name is Mira Shoshana Shifrin, and then I married my husband, so then I became Mira Shifrin Spenner. So I literally kept the same initials. Good job, me.
Great.
Um, you can also look me up on Facebook. Um, my musician page is Mira Shifrin. Oh, I'm sorry, is Mira Spenner flutist. Because we haven't had our big wedding yet, it still says that I'm Mira Shifrin, engaged to Jeffrey Spenner, but we are in fact married, I swear. Um, but so you can always check me out there. Um, I think Instagram is kind of weird, so I've never done it. I also don't need one more thing to get sucked into.
I
I'm
can
already
suck you in
good
fast.
at.
All right. Well, thanks again, and goodbye to our flutarian.